Hello cherry pies, I have got a beer and a bowl of pretzels which my boyfriend handed to me when I walked in from my evening walk, which was just lovely. And I had tarot on my mind, and I tried to do a little vlog about this while I was out, but it was so windy that I just thought this footage is going to be unusable, so I'm going to wait till I get home. So I'm going to use the last slice of sunlight to film myself talking about tarot, which, as anyone who's watched this channel for more than 5 minutes will know, is a massive passion of mine and is part of what makes up my life's work, my calling on this planet. And it's a topic that I feel very intensely about, and tarot is a tool that I owe so much to. And I take my craft as a reader very seriously, and as a student of tarot and a teacher of tarot very seriously. And it really has become a central point in my life. And I think that if somebody had come to me when I was 14 or 15 years old and told me that tarot is eventually going to end up being a central spoke of your life, it's going to be how you make your money, how you pay your rent, and it's going to give you, you know, countless smiles, and you're going to have countless conversations about it, and you're eventually going to end up writing part of the accompaniment book for a tarot deck, and you know, you're going to like be doing interviews about tarot and stuff, I probably wouldn't have been that surprised. I think even then I felt this really strong pull, and I knew that it meant something, and I knew that it was important somehow, and I knew that it was tying different parts of my psyche together in a really harmonious way. Even at that point, there was something about the symbolism that it offered to me and the feelings that I got when I played with the deck, even when I was handed the Marseille deck at just about the age of 13, 12 or 13. And I just played with it, you know. I never learned what any of the cards meant or anything like that. I just used to play with it, but I would play with it almost kind of in a fixated way. I'd wake up in the morning and I'd go and unwrap it from its cloth and I'd play with it. I'd just touch the cards and I'd look at the cards and I'd, you know, start to fall into the world. And I knew even then that it was a very special tool. And so I guess it wouldn't have surprised me to know that it would eventually become such an important part of my life. I'm eating pretzels and I'm going to have to cut all of that bit out. Can I just say, I don't know whether or not you can actually even see this from here, but I just want to mention that I have not recently pierced my nose. My nose piercing comes from when I was like 14 years old, but I just decided to stick a ring in it. It's nice to have it back actually. It's good. Anyway, my plan was not to go on some kind of sentimental tirade about how I feel about tarot and what it's done to change my life and all of that good stuff, even though that is all very true. The thing that I wanted to talk about with this video is decks, specifically because I'm really thinking about expanding my collection in the next couple of years. My wish list when I first started getting into collecting decks was very small, very kind of modest, and it's now expanded and expanded. I've got quite a few indie decks, quite a few decks made by designers on Etsy that are on my list that I want to get. I've also got a couple of you know, great kind of monolithic, everyone has this deck in their collection decks that I have on my wish list now. And actually it's gotten to the point where it's quite substantial. It's nowhere near the mammoth wish list that some people have, but it's definitely getting to a point that I never thought it would get to. I was a real Rider-Waite loyalist right up until about some point in 2013. And at that point I started to realise that I wanted to branch out into other imagery. I would watch videos of people's deck collections and stuff. I mean, I had a couple of oracle decks and an angel card deck and a feng shui deck, but I only had one tarot deck that I used, one tarot deck that I owned, and that was Rider-Waite. I never really collected other tarot decks. I was really a Rider-Waite loyalist for a long time. And then I started to realise over time that I was really envious of people who were using different imagery and making comparisons between different kinds of imagery and really just branching out and finding those deeper layers of meaning and different nuances of understanding, which can only come through using and working with and comparing different kinds of imagery and thinking about what that imagery brings to the meaning of a specific card. And I started to realise that I was hankering after that, and that was something that I really wanted. So I started with Gypsy Palace Tarot. That was the first tarot deck that I kind of allowed myself to play with and explore other than Rider-Waite. I mean, I just want to stress that I had Marseille and I had Mythic Tarot, but that was a long time before, in my teens, in my early teens. Rider-Waite was the first deck that I had, you know, in my 20s that I really committed to like using and getting to know and working with. So I just want to put that out there, that Rider-Waite was not my first deck ever, but it was my first deck that really kind of allowed me to start giving readings online, giving readings to friends without using the book, really committing things to memory and allowing my study to really go to the next level. and Gypsy Palace Tarot kind of broke my cherry. It was like the first other deck. It was my entrance into tarot deck collection. And I love that deck, and I'll always love it. It did something really enchanting for me. It introduced me to new imagery, and it let me see that there was something very meaningful and very enriching about having different kinds of imagery and not just sticking with one deck. Although I don't think there's anything wrong with sticking with one deck, but it was really time for me to explore other stuff. And since then I've gotten other decks that I've shown in my deck collection video, which I'll leave down below. And what I wanted to talk about really was the concept of deck collection versus buying decks that you are going to use to do readings and stuff. So for me, I think of collecting as a hobby. I think of collecting as something that one consciously decides to do. It's not something that one falls into necessarily. It's not something that one does in an unconscious way, in a way that they're not aware of. Collecting is something that you do when you're a geek, when you're a nerd, when you're really hardcore for something. And I've seen videos online that have ranged everywhere, from people collecting vintage cars to people collecting vintage sunglasses. I've seen, you know, a man with like 300 different species of tarantula, and I've, you know, that he's like collecting them, like, and feeding them and looking after them and mating them and putting that all over the internet. I've seen people who collect filofaxes, vintage filofaxes, limited edition filofaxes. You know, there's people who collect stamps, there's people who collect all kinds of things. And to me, that is a thing. That's not something that you unconsciously do, like you're hoarding or you're overtly materialistic or whatever. That is a decision that comes from a conscious place, that comes from a place of passion and intensity. I have a friend who collects comic books, and I know nothing really about comic books, but there are all these specific editions that you've got to get, and these specific, like, you know, issues that are like, you know, a certain amount of kind of editions old and wrapped in plastic, and you get what I'm trying to say, okay? Collecting is a conscious thing. It's something that comes from a really impassioned place. I don't think it's something that happens accidentally, and I don't think it should be confused with empty materialism or with the desire to hoard stuff. So when people say things like, well, you know, how many tarot decks is too much, and I know someone online who's got 50, 60, 70, 80 tarot decks, I mean, it's too much. You can't possibly work with them all, you can't possibly spend the time with them all, you can't possibly value them all. I've seen that opinion. It comes up on a cycle, you know, and it's not just about tarot, it's about tools, or it's about crystals, or it's about anything like that. There are always going to be these people who are they're kind of set in their position as somebody that kind of needs to vocally disparage materialism, and they will say, like, you know, it's a ridiculous amount of whatever to have, you know, it's not healthy, or it's not productive, or you can't possibly be valuing what you've got. But for me, collecting tarot decks is different to purchasing tarot decks specifically to do readings with them. If you have it in your mind that you're going to collect decks, that then becomes a hobby on its own, right? That's its own thing. And you collect decks for various different reasons, you know. You might not even collect decks to read with them. You might buy one, look at it once, and then put it away on the shelf, because essentially it comes from a publisher whose every single deck you collect. You don't collect them to work with them, you collect them because you want to collect every deck from that publisher, whether it's to later sell them, or whether it's just for posterity, to, you know, in the future, or whatever it's for. If you plan to play with them one day, but maybe not now, but you just want to have them, or maybe the decks are limited edition in some cases and you want to make sure you get them before they're gone. Whatever it is, a collection, it comes from a conscious place. And people who collect tarot decks, whether it's they want every deck from a certain publisher, or they want all dark decks, or they want all fantasy decks, or they want all novelty decks, I think that that is fucking cool. I just love it. I think it's really awesome. I think that purchasing decks that you're actually going to do readings with, or that you're going to use for clients or use for yourself personally, that's a different thing. That kind of wish list would probably be a lot smaller, or a lot more kind of like pared down to just the essential, and you would really look at something and decide if it really, really gripped you and grabbed you before you purchased it. I'm personally starting to feel that I want to broaden my kind of collection of tarot decks. I love to have the options, I love to have choices. I don't think I'd want to have an overwhelming amount of choice, because I'd go into analysis paralysis, I'd go into like choice paralysis, and that would kind of be a bit difficult for me. But I think I really enjoy the choices that I have now. I absolutely love reading the notes for a client reading, and then just either instantly knowing which deck I want, or going there and perusing. and just being like, what would be good for this client's needs? What would really speak to this client's needs? And I can always find something. And it's just, there's something about that is so holy to me. And I don't think there's anything like empty and materialistic about having decks to choose from. I really don't. I'm so in love with the tool of tarot, and I know so many other people feel the same way as me. I'm so in love with the tool that when I see interpretations of the essential meanings of that tool through the eyes of an artist and through the eyes of a creator, I am, when it links up with some feelings that I have or what's coming out of my psyche or what I need from my clients, I am endlessly fascinated by that. And that is a beautiful use of money. And I will get use out of that even if I don't use it, which I will. But even these people who buy these decks that they don't even use, even these people who buy decks just to look at them, just to have them, just to own them, just to know that they're a part of the collection, they're getting something out of it, believe me. Even if they're not using it for clients, even if they're not using it for themselves, even if it is just to go into the collection, to perhaps one day be used, but maybe not. Those people are still getting something out of it, because being a collector in itself is this point of pride and achievement. It's special. It's great to add something to the collection. I have a small collection of nun dolls. I also have a small collection of vintage postcards of film stars, particularly silent film stars. I love nun dolls, and I love like those vintage postcards. When I see one, I pick it up. I also have a collection of rosaries. I love to collect rosaries. I have neon ones that are made just for fashion. I have kind of like really classic Catholic ones made out of precious stones. I love collecting rosaries. It's a thing that I have. Do I use them necessarily? Do I get them out and like play with them? Occasionally. But they're just there because I like them. I want to add, I love it. It's just, if you don't collect, then you won't understand. And if you've ever wanted to collect anything, or if you ever have collected anything, then you will understand. You'll get it, and that's what it really is all about. That's what collecting tarot decks is all about. I personally would not purchase a deck that I wouldn't use. And so that makes my wish list manageable, but it is getting larger. I just posted a photo of it on Instagram earlier, and it's going to be like negligible compared to some of the wish lists that you guys have, I'm sure. But it's a lot bigger than I thought it ever would be. I'm really starting to enjoy the idea of purchasing decks for the concept of them, purchasing decks that just instantly grab me, purchasing decks that are independent, that I know there's only a limited run of, that I think are really beautiful, that probably won't be available to purchase for much longer. And I'm even thinking about getting my first, what I would consider to be kind of a novelty deck. I mean, because it's just beautiful and it links in with something that I really love and I'm really interested in. So, I'm branching out a bit more. One thing I also wanted to say was, I've noticed a lot of tarot readers say that they have a deck that they only use for themselves. They have a deck that they literally only use for readings for themselves, and they don't use it with any clients or anybody else, or do readings for anyone else with it. And I think that I've been looking for that deck for me. And I've thought about either purchasing another Gypsy Palace Tarot or another Vintage Wisdom Oracle, so I can have that second one to use for me, because I think both of them would be really good for those purposes. Or I think there's one deck that's kind of coming out, the Sloane holodeck. I'll leave some links in the doobly-doo, that you can get on pre-order now. And that looks really enticing. That looks quite juicy to me. That deck, when I saw the images of it, my heart started to race. It really connected to something in my psyche. It really made me fucking feel something. And I was like, shit, this is a really important interpretation of tarot. This is going somewhere for me. This is taking me on a journey. So that might be one that I would just use for me, but I would be so tempted to use it for clients, because that's what I do. I strive to give clients the tarot experience of a lifetime. I strive for it to be a game-changing reading. I want it to be a game-changing reading. I want it to help them to dig deep and go to the centre of the soul. So if I see a deck and I think, yes, this deck is speaking to me, then it makes sense that I would want to be able to have the option to use it for clients. So it might be a case of buying two of that deck, I don't know. But I like the idea of having a deck that's just mine, that doesn't have any other emotional associations or cognitive associations or energies attached to it. And I don't have that at the moment, which might surprise some people. But I don't, and I haven't spent an intense amount of money on decks during my lifetime, but I am starting to feel more and more like it's something that I want to do. I want to expand the collection a little more. And when it comes to, you know, having too many decks to like use or study or appreciate or spend time with, I suppose in a sense I can see for some people from an outside perspective why that might look true, why that might seem like a thing that is going on, that, you know, you have these decks but you don't really appreciate them, you get really excited and really hyped up on a deck, and then as soon as you've got it you want another one. I can appreciate that it might seem empty and materialistic, and I can appreciate that it might seem as though it's just a load of hype and not really much appreciation. But by the same token, I have whole days sometimes, I clear whole days in my schedule where I sit down and I just select one of my decks from the like vintage leather carry case that I keep them all in at the moment, and I just open it up and I sit there with it. I make a pot of tea and I sit there with my notebook, and what I actually do is I use a refill pad. I'm going to actually show you guys what I'm doing with my tarot journaling now, because it's a completely different setup than I had before. I know I've never really shown my tarot journal, like, you know, I've only really shown the front of it and a couple of pages of it before. But this time I will show you guys what kind of system I have, because I realised that I wanted to change my system completely so that I could find things more easily, and so that I could reference the different decks that I'm studying and learning with and add to the notes. So I have a completely different like filing system almost as my tarot journaling system now. So I'd love to be able to introduce you guys to that. But anyway, so I sit down, I make my pot of tea, I go through my vintage carry case and I have a look for a deck that I want to do some work with. Sometimes I will just stick my hand in there without even looking and just see what I grab. You know, what's the first deck that I touch? That's the deck that I'm going to write some notes about or journal with or explore. And sometimes it will intentionally be a deck that I haven't done much work with. And I will just start riffing, I will just start journaling, I will just start allowing myself to go into the depths of the deck and really explore the imagery. And I like the feeling of having a deck there in my bag that I purchased a few months ago and thinking, there you are, like I've not really bonded with you properly yet. Like I've only had 2 sessions with shadowscapes since I bought it. And yes, I do use a monocle to magnify the images. I know there's a couple of people that use a magnifying glass to magnify the images, and I actually have a necklace with a monocle on it, so I use that to actually have a look what's going on, because it's so detailed and so fine. But yeah, I've only done a couple of sessions with shadowscapes since I've owned it. But it's nice to know that it's there, and I know that I'll get to it. Every single thing that I purchase has its time. It has its time to be purchased, and it has its time to be worked with. It has its time to be appreciated, and it has its time to be used for clients or for myself. And, you know, it has its time to be cleansed, and it has its time to be centre stage. And I don't feel like there's anything empty or hollow about having decks that I get really excited about, I get hyped up on, I buy them, and then, you know, they kind of sit around for a little while. They sit around for a reason, and I will get to them. I purchased them because I loved them and I wanted them, and I still love them and I still want them, and it's really lovely to be able to have options. And when it comes to my journaling, I don't think people realise how much you can get done with a deck in just 1 or 2 sittings. If you take out a deck that you've purchased recently, that you haven't had a chance to work with, and you just clear a few hours, you know, even if you clear the afternoon or the evening just to sit with it and write some notes, make some notes and really enjoy it, go into it, relish that process. It is a really exciting thing, and it is a beautiful part of the journey for me, and it never gets old and it never feels wasteful. It always feels fruitful, and it always feels nourishing, and it always makes me overflow with new insights. And as a witch and as a spiritualist, a mystic, I guess you could say, I love symbolism. I love symbolism. I'm fascinated by what it does to me and the power that it has over others, and the power that it has to unite us all, and how it relates to the collective unconscious, and how that reflects in my life and from my perspective. So tarot is never going to stop doing its thing for me, and I have time. I have time, not as much time as I'd like, granted, but I have time to do these things. I have time to journal, I have time to sit with the decks. And when I make that time, when I clear that window, beautiful things happen. And I'm glad to have made the purchases that I've made. And this year I will be making more. And, you know, I do feel that kind of, I think for a lot of people that I've kind of followed and had a look at their deck collections and really enjoyed talking to them, listening to them talk about their decks and stuff, I do think there's that sense that they get excited about a deck, they purchase the deck, they talk about the deck, and then they're on to wanting the next one. But I'm the same. If I've not got a deck on order, I'm now that woman who's thinking, what do I want on order? What should I get on order? You know, when will I be able to afford to get something on order? When's it kind of realistic? Perhaps I shouldn't maybe this week, but maybe next week I can. Like, that is what I'm thinking. And, you know, I'm still very, very selective, and I still only want decks that really speak to me, and that's a given. And some people have recommended decks to me that they thought that I would like, or that they thought I'd be really into, that I really wasn't. So I know that I'm very specific and I'm very selective, and there have been 1 or 2 tarot decks that I've placed onto my wish list, and then upon watching several lengthy reviews, I've removed them from my wish list because I'm looking for something really on the nose, really right on the money. And if there's a couple of cards that don't gel with me and I'm not 100% on how I feel about the overall energy of the deck after seeing a review, then I won't go for it. And I think that's something that's really useful about reviews, is that ironically, a lot of these lengthier, very dedicated reviews are done by people who collect tarot. They actually collect decks. They either collect decks with a certain theme, or they collect decks from a certain publisher. Whatever it is, they give themselves a certain amount of spending allowance for the year and they go to it. It is a hobby, it is a passion, you know. It's an intense thing that they do, that they really love to do. Ironically, those are the people that make among some of the best reviews, and actually what it does is those reviews help people who are not collectors of tarot, in the sense of, like, you know, I collect for the sake of collecting, I collect because it's a hobby of mine. They're not collectors, they only want to buy specific decks that they'll really be able to use. Either they don't have the budget to spend on tarot isn't top of their financial priority list, they only want to drop coin on stuff that they'll use. Maybe they're not natural collectors, maybe they only want stuff that's going to be in use. Maybe they only buy 2 or 3 decks a year and they really need to be sure. And actually what's great is that the hardcore collectors are legends, because they make the reviews that the rest of us can check out and be like, okay, now I know that I really want that, or now I know that that really gels with me. And that's amazing. That's a gift that they give to us. So that to me is awesome, and I've been watching so many tarot reviews lately, and I really commend and thank the people that make them, because they're just so useful. And Owl Moon, I never remember the numbers at the end of the channel, but Owl Moon, you know who I'm talking about. If you don't, I'll link her in the doobly-doo. Subscribe, subscribe, subscribe. She is fucking amazing. I just adore her. But yeah, her reviews are sensational, absolutely sensational. Avalon, I'll link in the doobly-doo. Massive tarot and oracle collection. Love the way she talks about the cards, so passionate. And Gypsy Chick, I love her. I think is it Gypsy Chick or Gypsy Chic? I think people call her Gypsy Chick. I'll link her in the doobly-doo. So passionate about tarot. The way she talks about it makes me feel like a novice. Like, she's so passionate. She knows what's up. She knows what the publishers are doing, what they're up to, what they have been up to, what's quality, what's not quality. I love it. So, you know, these people that seem to have like 3 times the fire for actually getting decks and actually owning them and touching them and just having them in their collection, they're the people that really help me to decipher what it is that I want to do now that I'm sure that I do want to start expanding my collection. And I do want to start doing reviews myself, and I do want more imagery, because I've witnessed the value of the different imagery, and I've witnessed the joy of the different imagery. And, you know, maybe some people do see, you know, massive collections of decks and they do feel annoyed by it, or they do feel it's materialistic, but so what? You know, it's your money, you do with it what you will, and if you know that it's floating your boat and it's flicking your switch and it's doing something for you, then all power to you. There's way worse things you could spend your money on. You know, it's art, and it's most of the time done with a great deal of integrity, and it's done with meaning, and it's done with passion, and the people involved in it are passionate about it, and then we buy it and we're passionate about it, you know, and then we give readings to people who are passionate about it too. So it's just a big circle of passion, and that makes a great deal of sense to me. I am rambling like hell, it's ridiculous. Okay, I'm going to lose the light, and I'm halfway through an amazing sale over on my shop, so I have stuff to do. And I've been working away, beavering away all day, and I think that's part of what gave me the kind of like desire to do this video, was because I love that feeling of selecting a deck. I think it's wicked. And at the last minute, sometimes I'll change my mind. Somebody asked me actually recently, how do you select a deck for a client? And it's purely intuition. You know, I look at the query and I just go with the deck that I feel. If I'm away and I'm working away from home, sometimes I'll only take Ride Away and maybe one other deck like Osho Zen, which I think gives me a very nice in the middle on the spectrum of tarot and oracle. you know. So normally it'll be Rider-Waite and Osho Zen, or Osho Zen. They'll be the two that I'll take with me. But sometimes I change it up. Sometimes it's Rider-Waite and Psychic Tarot Oracle for the Heart, which is another big one that I love to use. But if I'm at home and I have all the decks at my disposal, then it will simply be a case of looking at the energies and thinking, have I worked with this client before? And then bringing those associations into the mix, just trying to understand what it is that they'll really need. And then before long, I know what it is that's going to be useful. I know what it is that's going to give me what I need and give the client what they need. So I'll pick that up. I'll normally have a few on rotation. Like right now I've been working all day and I have on rotation, just for your information, Vintage Wisdom Oracle, which I adore. I did a review. If you didn't see the review, I'll link that in the doobly-doo. There's going to be a lot of linking in the doobly-doo with this one. The old trusty Rider-Waite. It is never far. It is never ever far from my hands. I adore it. I know some people don't, and that's absolutely fine, but it's my baby. It's my baby. Psychic Tarot Oracle for the Heart is on hand. I've already done 2 readings with this today and they were marvellous, so rich, so meaty, so in-depth. Love this deck. And a beautiful woman sent me the Bohemian Gothic Tarot as a gift. And I've got it on hand and I'm really tempted. I'm really tempted to do a couple of shadow work readings with this deck for clients. For me, I know I've said this before in a video and I'll say it again, some decks I receive, I open them. As I said, I'm not a massive collector, I haven't collected a massive amount yet, but with the tarot decks that I have received or oracle decks that I have received, I'll open them up and I'll know straight away whether I can immediately start to use them for clients or whether I need to do quite a lot of journaling and path working and exploring. With the decks that I feel that I can immediately use, I still will journal with them and path work with them and bond with them, but I pretty much know that once I've done my cleansing thing and stuff, I can start getting to work with them with clients and they will give me satisfying readings. And I can catch up on the journaling and the path working while I'm using them as a working deck. Some decks I cannot do that with, like Shadowscapes. I opened it and I was like, no, there's no way that I'm going to be able to use this straight away. Gypsy Palace Tarot, I opened it, I was like, no, there's no way I'm going to be able to use this straight away. Manga Tarot, I opened it, I was like, yep. Revelations Tarot, yep, no problem. And Gothic, Bohemian Gothic is one of those ones that I'm looking at thinking, yeah, I think I could actually do this. I think I could use this now for client readings. So that's one that I haven't actually used, but it's sitting there and I'm kind of thinking I have some shadow work readings coming up and I may do the inevitable and actually like break this one out and see what it has to say for my clients, and I think it will be really, really juicy stuff. But anyway, I'm losing the light and I have some more pretzels to munch before I get back to work. So much love. Thank you for listening to my tarot ramble, and I'd be particularly interested in opinions about this one. Like, please, let's just chat one out in the comments underneath. So much love. Blessed be.